Good morning, everyone. Smiling happens in response to internal shift, not external circumstance. Watch how this works. Something pleasant occurs outside you. Your nervous system registers it, interprets it, decides whether it qualifies as smile worthy based on current state of being, accumulated experiences, active wounds, and whether you're even capable of receiving goodness right now. Only after that entire internal process completes does facial response happen, muscle contraction, expression formation, what you call smiling. So saying something makes you smile big implies causation running wrong direction, implies thing outside creates response inside, when really your internal state determines whether external thing registers as good news at all. Meaning, if you're not internally aligned with receiving goodness, no amount of good news creates genuine smile, just performance of smile, social expectation of appropriate response, muscle movement without corresponding internal shift. Real question isn't what's coming Saturday. Question is, are you internally positioned to receive it as good when it arrives? Or will your wounds, your fears, your habitual pessimism translate even good news into something to be suspicious of? Nerve endings firing randomly like electrical systems shorting out. Saturday, 21. Specific date creates urgency, creates countdown, creates anticipation structure where hope gets attached to calendar marker as if calendar knows what's coming, as if dates carry inherent meaning beyond human imposed time measurement. But Saturday is just rotation. 21st is just number. Neither contains promise of good news. Neither holds inherent potential for smile creating event. You're the one loading that date with significance, projecting hope onto temporal marker, making ordinary passage of time into something special, because making it special feels better than acknowledging it's just another rotation, another number, another day that may or may not contain anything different from yesterday. And that projection, that loading of significance onto random date, what happens when Saturday 21 arrives and nothing smile worthy occurs, when good news doesn't materialize, when day passes like any other day? Do you extend deadline? Do you reinterpret ordinary events as fulfillment of promise to preserve belief? Do you decide maybe good news came, but you missed it, so actually prophecy was accurate and you were inattentive? Or do you acknowledge that attaching hope to specific dates is set up for disappointment when dates arrive empty of promised content? Which response serves you better? Flexible reinterpretation to maintain belief, or honest acknowledgement that predictions about specific dates rarely manifest as predicted? Skin hypersensitive like nerve endings exposed without protective layer. Good news. What qualifies? What criteria must information meet to count as good? And who decides, who determines what news deserves that label? Because good is relative, subjective, dependent on values, priorities, current situation, what you're comparing it against. News that seems good to external observer might land as neutral or even problematic for person receiving it based on factors observer can't see. Context observer doesn't have complications. Observer hasn't considered. So promising good news, promising something that makes you smile big, that requires knowing your internal landscape, knowing what you value, knowing what would actually register as good given your specific circumstances, wounds, hopes, fears, and generic promise of good news on specific date. That's not knowing, that's guessing, that's hoping coincidence aligns with prediction. That's counting on statistically likely event occurring and being interpreted as fulfillment of promise. Because most people experience something mildly pleasant most days if they're looking for it. Small kindness, unexpected convenience, piece of information that shifts something slightly. And if you're primed to interpret Saturday 21 as day good news arrives, if you're actively looking for smile-worthy event, you'll find something to fit prophecy, even if it's ordinary event. You're elevating to significant through interpretive lens of expectation. That's not prophecy fulfilling. That's confirmation bias working exactly as designed. Lungs struggling like air turned viscous and won't pull smoothly. Something makes you smile big. Size of smile as indicator of goodness magnitude. Bigger smile equals better news. Assumes smile size correlates directly with news quality. Assumes facial expression accurately reflects internal experience. But smiling big. What does that even mean? Full teeth display, visible crinkling around eyes, duration of expression, spontaneity versus performance. Because smiles are complex. Duchenne's smile involves different muscles than social smile. Genuine pleasure creates different facial pattern than polite response to expected good news. Body knows difference even when observer doesn't. So you can smile big at something that doesn't actually create internal shift. Can perform appropriate response to news that should be good even if it doesn't register as good internally. Can display all physical markers of happiness while feeling nothing or feeling something entirely different underneath performance. And focusing on smile size, on external display of response, that keeps attention outward. Keeps you monitoring for visible proof of goodness rather than checking whether goodness is actually being experienced internally regardless of facial expression. Is performing big smile because you're supposed to, equivalent to experiencing joy that naturally creates smile? Most people conflate these. Believe display equals experience. Never question whether they're generating performance instead of feeling. Can you tell difference in yourself between smile that happens because body can't contain pleasure and smile that happens because situation calls for smiling? Heartbeat erratic like rhythm section, lost the count, coming in, movement toward you, arrival from outside, good news, traveling from wherever it currently exists toward location where you'll receive it. Passive grammar again. News coming to you, you waiting, you receiving, you responding appropriately with big smile when it arrives. Never. You going toward good news. You creating conditions for goodness. You being person good things approach because you've become magnetic to goodness through internal work rather than waiting for goodness to arrive independent of your state. And that passivity, that waiting for good news to come to you, what does that create? What happens when you organize around receiving rather than generating? When you focus on what's coming rather than what you're becoming, you become dependent on external circumstances aligning, on luck, on coincidence, on forces you can't control deciding to send something your way, versus becoming someone who creates conditions for goodness, who notices small pleasant things daily rather than waiting for big smile on specific date. Who doesn't need Saturday 21 to bring good news because they're actively making life good through choices, through perspective, through internal work that makes every day potential source of smile. Which feels more empowering, waiting for news to come Saturday, or being someone who doesn't need specific date to promise goodness because you're creating it consistently? Stomach clenched like fist, refusing to open. Virgos, plural. Addressing, group, creating community around shared identity based on birth timing, suggesting that good news coming Saturday applies to everyone born during specific weeks of year, regardless of individual circumstances. That's absurd. Actually absurd. Good news for one, Virgo, might be terrible news for another. Something that makes one smile big might make another grimace. Birthday month doesn't create shared experience of events any more than shoe size creates shared taste in food. But grouping people by birth timing, making predictions that apply to entire demographic, suggesting Saturday 21 brings good news for all Virgos. That works because it's vague enough that most people can interpret something in their lives as fulfilling promise. Specific enough to create anticipation, but not specific enough to be verifiably wrong when nothing smile-worthy occurs. It's prediction that can't fail, because failure just means you weren't paying attention, or good news was subtle, or it's coming but delayed, or you misunderstood what good news looks like. Always a way to preserve predictions accuracy, regardless of what actually happens. That's not insight. That's unfalsifiable claim designed to feel good rather than be true. And accepting that, organizing hope around that, believing good news comes Saturday because someone made vague promise to entire demographic. That's giving away your discernment. Trading critical thinking for comfort of believing something pleasant is approaching. Is that trade worth what it costs? Jaw aching from holding tension that serves no protective purpose. Something makes you smile big. Something. Unspecified. Could be anything. Could be nothing masquerading as something significant through interpretive generosity. And that lack of specificity, that's what makes these promises work, because something always happens, life continues, events occur, and at least one of those events can be framed as good news if you're motivated to find fulfillment of promise. Package arrives earlier than expected, someone texts unexpectedly, weather is pleasant, coffee tastes particularly good. Any of these could be something if you need Saturday 21 to deliver something smile-worthy. But would you have smiled at these things without prediction priming you to interpret them as significant? Would early package or unexpected text or good coffee count as good news if you weren't actively looking for good news to fulfill promise made about specific date? Or would they just be ordinary pleasant occurrences that happen regularly without being elevated to good news that makes you smile big? The difference matters, because one is event creating response, other is expectation creating interpretation of ordinary event as extraordinary fulfillment. And confusing these. Believing that ordinary event made extraordinary through expectation lens is proof that prediction was accurate. That's how belief in unprovable claims gets reinforced. That's how pattern of waiting for external validation of hope continues. That's how you stay passive, waiting, hoping, attaching significance to dates and vague promises instead of being active creator of your own daily goodness. Breathing labored like each inhale requires conscious effort to complete, so no. I won't confirm good news comes Saturday, won't validate hope attached to specific date as if calendar coordinates carry meaning. Won't promise something makes you smile big, as if smile creation is outside your control, dependent on external circumstances aligning favorably. Instead, I'll say this: you can smile today, right now, not because something smile-worthy happened, but because you're capable of generating smile internally through shift in perspective, through choice to notice small pleasant things, through decision to be a person who smiles, not because circumstances demand it, but because smiling itself feels good. And you can create conditions for goodness, not wait for goodness to arrive Saturday, but recognize goodness already present. Make choices that increase pleasant experiences. Become person good things approach, because you're aligned internally with receiving them rather than waiting externally for them to arrive. And you can release need for specific dates to be significant. Can acknowledge that Saturday 21 is just day, just rotation, just number, and making it special doesn't make it special. Only what you do with it creates significance. So do something. Don't wait for something to be done to you. Don't organize around receiving good news. Organize around being a person who creates good news through choosing differently, seeing differently, being differently. That's power. That's agency. That's what actually changes experience, from waiting for smile to choosing to smile, regardless of whether external circumstances provide traditional smile-worthy content. And that shift, that internal recalibration, that's available now, today, this moment, not Saturday, not when good news arrives, now. Without needing promise, without needing prediction, without needing the specific date to carry significance. It doesn't inherently possess. Just you, choosing, smiling, creating, being. That's what actually makes you smile big. Not something coming from outside, but something shifting inside that makes outside irrelevant to your capacity for joy. That's the only good news that matters, and it doesn't wait for Saturday. Truth isn't found in others' stories. It's discovered in your own silence. No predictions, just presence. Stay curious, stay awake.